very much so. But we have an opportunity as citizens to open the doors, to make things more known and
and we're going to do that, but we're also going to go and be with people. Because this is, in our opinion, and we've done 50 years of justice work, legal work, educational and organizing campaigns, and on major issues. Some of you know what they are. I'll mention a few of them. But there's nothing like this. In our opinion, this is the issue that can shift consciousness and shift our economy and shift our culture and our energy sources, the way we handle nuclear materials on this planet, whether we have peace or not, how we relate to one another instead of killing one another all the time. This has major possibilities for us. It also could have threats. But the really awful thing is we don't know, because it's been kept secret for 80 years. And we're finally at a place where the disclosure of that information that has been kept secret for 80 years has begun. And we are a central organization in this process. And Danny has 40, actually 50 years of experience in this particular field that he was doing on the side all the time when we were doing all the other campaigns. So we're positioned right now to really join with others and lead together in a direction that would be a positive direction for this unfolding. There are negatives. I mean, there are people who will turn this information into weapons, lethal weapons. There are people who will drive us into 1,000 years of war with ETs in our galaxy. I mean, because that's how their minds work. I'm not saying that they're bad people. I'm just saying their worldviews are like that. And this is our responsibility. Our responsibility is to stand up now. And all the consciousness work we've done, all the conferences that we've gone to, like this EXPO that just happened, all the other things we've done, we have to bring this more evolved consciousness that we want to bear. And we have to do what we can to have this unfold in a way that there will be a future for our children and our grandchildren, and that we will have a golden age. Forgive me if I'm repeating something you already know, but I'm just going to give you a little information about our organization and Danny and I and our projects. We started out at the Christic Institute, and we merged and became the Romero Institute at a certain point when we left Washington, D.C. We were there for 20 years. And this is the same logo. It looks like it's the same font. It's everything's the same. The agenda is the same. It's a different thing. You know, because George Bush started a sort of rolling campaign in Washington, D.C. to take away our 501c3 as the Christic Institute. because he was really mad because we exposed him and his office and everything for what they were doing in Iran County. And so after years of the IRS not finding anything wrong with our any of our banking stuff or any of our finance stuff, they took it away saying, well, everything you did was really for political reasons. And that's not true. It was for constitutional reasons and illegalities and drug smuggling and illegal gun running and assassination codes. That's what it was all about, and everybody knows it. But we decided not to spend 10 years of our lives fighting the IRS. And so the people in the Romero Institute said, come and take over the Romero Institute and keep going. So that's what we did. And so now the Romero Institute is a continuation of Christic. And the campaigns that we've done over the years with these two organizations, in there include things like the Karen Silkwood case, which is how Danny and I met. Danny had done the Pentagon Papers case, he'd done the Watergate case with other lawyers. And we did Silkwood, and then we did the Greensboro case, where they had killed so many demonstrators, labor organizers with the Klan and Nazis had right in front of television cameras, and everybody saw it, and nothing got done about it. The federal case didn't amount to anything. The state case didn't amount to anything. We came in and did civil suit and prosecuted the Klan and the Nazis in Greensboro, which was unheard of. You don't win against the Klan in North Carolina, but we did. We went on to do a case for an African-American mayor in Mississippi who was falsely accused of murder. They would have executed him. Danny ran an investigation that exposed who the real murderers were, and they didn't kill him. And we also went on to do the sanctuary case, first sanctuary case in the country, defending Latin American people who were fleeing for their lives from El Salvador, and were being helped by the Catholic Church there. And that whole case was up against the Reagan administration for their violations of our laws that protect people who are fleeing for their lives from other countries. And that was one on Danny's arguments on appeal. We went on this other things like them all. I don't want to take up all your time, but we went on to help the Lakota people, work with the Lakota people. We started a project there 18 years ago, the Lakota People's Law Project, and because they were taking their children all the time with the Department of Social Services, and Danny ran an investigation that was amazing, and it became very clear that these kids were like a cash cow for the state. There was so much money coming in from the federal government for every one of those children. As long as they gave them drugs and made it a medical issue rather than just a foster care issue, there were different things they were doing to make it very lucrative. And that it was actually a source of income for the state to take all those kids. So it became a huge thing on NPR, and National Public Radio ran a series which she won the Peabody for it, and it exposed to the whole country the injustices that were going on, some of them in the coast. There's so many that it's shocking. Anyway, that was another thing we did. What I want to say right now is we've never done anything as big as this. Never. I mean, we never slept when we did our own contract. It was this constant work. This is an example. At Christmas, Christmas and the holidays and New Year's, our holiday was 3 hours long. I mean, literally, we've been going through the weekends. It's not bad. I'm not complaining. I'm just saying this is another one of those things. And I'm hoping and praying that this will become a movement, that people will join with us and we'll all do this together. I mean, we'll keep doing it no matter what, but it would be best if we all did it together like we've done other things. And because this, as I said before, has real potential for solutions that we can't get to any other way. So the project itself is called the New Paradigm Institute. It's another birthing of a campaign by the Romero Institute, and you can find it online at newparadigminstitute.org. When it all started really in 2017, when Lou Elizondo,
Right behind you.
when Lou Elizondo became a whistleblower with the New York Times. And 2 or 3 stories came out in a row and in the New York Times about how there were real sightings, and the government had tapes and had been watching for months and months and months down off the coast of Baja, these vehicles and UFOs that were flying around doing all this stuff. And it was so beyond anybody's physics that anything that we know about. I mean, you could have one of these, which was called, there were different shapes, but some of them were called Tic Tacs, but they could go from being 80,000 feet in the air to the surface of the water in a half a second, and under the water going 100 miles an hour. And our bodies would explode, implode. They would implode. We couldn't do anything like that in Vietnam. And but they've been watching them, the Nimitz, people on the Nimitz, the big air, I think it's what is it? Aircraft carrier. And they had all the records, and it had been on for months and months and months. And he just got the permission to get some of the videos out, and out they came, and it began this big process, which then resulted in 3 guys testifying to the House of Representatives last July. I don't know if you saw it, but David Grush, had run the Pentagon, had been very involved in the Pentagon program to investigate all this stuff in intelligence, and also 2 Navy pilots. And one of them from the East Coast, one of them from the West Coast. And when they said, I mean, Grush said, look, our government has retrieved crash retrievals, has taken the vehicles into possession, and the bodies that were with them that were non-human bodies. And the pilots were saying, we're seeing these kinds of vehicles almost every day as we're flying on both coasts. I mean, the amount of activity was way more than I realized. And I think more than most citizens ever thought was going on. And another example of this is Richard Dolan, who is our dear friend, Danny's known him for years, and he's known as the best historian in this field, is coming out soon with 2 volumes of a book. It's like a series, 1, 2. Altogether, it's more than 600 pages, and it's all about the UFOs in the ocean. The whole thing. Can you believe over 600 pages of that? I mean, who knew? I mean, we've known that Air Force people and pilots have seen them come up out of the ocean, like this one, these people that were flying, this regular pilots, and they said, "What? Why is there a city in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean?" Because they could see all these lights, right? And then all of a sudden, it came up out of the water, and so the city was actually a gigantic UFO. And they came up out of the water. This is just one. He's got 600 pages of this stuff that's coming out. So we've got to really get real here. We have non-human visitors that may live here under the water in the mountains, and or even off planet, but like around out there, just hanging around. We don't know. Exactly. And we have to know now. Well, there could be a security problem, yes, or they could be trying to help us. Well, we just have to know. And Brush said, when he was talking to 60 people in Wall Street, he said, there's only 50 people that really know about this. God, that's not very many people. He says, only 50 people who really know what's going on. And the rest of us don't, including presidents, senators, our elected representatives, etc. So this is really, and we think, of course, I mean, Danny knows a lot more, and he'll say a lot more than what I'm saying, but we think it's because of profits. There are aerospace industries that want to make a lot of money back engineering this stuff, and they don't want to share patents or this, and they want to keep it secret. There's some of that going on. They're in the military, there's some total freak out. We're supposed to be protecting everybody. We don't know what to do about this. We don't have a match for this, and in a fight we're probably done. So there's some of that, and then who knows what else there is. because we're not being, all right, so we've done many investigations. Danny is probably the best nonprofit lawyer in the country, maybe in the last 100 years, that can do professional investigations. And we will be investigating this. Secondly, all right, so we started a project. My job is to tell you what's going on in the project and then get it over to him, who has 50 years of experience in this field. So we started a project. After the three guys testified last July, I had never gotten into this. I'm the executive director of these two organizations, and I always thought, well, I don't think we should do this as a project because, they're going to say we're all crazy and we've got tinfoil hats and everything. This is going to interfere with all the other projects we're doing, so we can't do it. But after these guys testified in July, we all thought, okay, this is it. This is it. We've got to find out what's going on. So we started the project. One woman, really kind woman, gave us a large seed grant, large enough for us to open an office in DC, start to hire people. Jim Garrison, some of you may know of him, he ran the State of the World Forum. He left here and went out there. He's been out there working every day in that office. He's the director of that office. He's talking to the Congress. He's talking with interfaith people all over the world. He's on it. And he has contacts all over the country and the world because of the State of the World Forum. And he sees it. He sees, oh, this is big. This is really it. I mean, people used to come together in the State of the World Forum to talk about the problems in the world and what we could do about them. And he always wanted something that would shift everybody. And he believes, as we do, that this could be it. So that happened. And then we put together a comms team of young people. We got 3 generations working on this thing. And they started doing social media and podcasts and put together an action website. And this one guy's a very experienced press guy. And another guy's tech up to the wazoo. I mean, he's out of Silicon Valley, has years of experience in tech. So they all started, and by November 1st, Danny started being on podcasts and television interviews and Zooms and webinars and everything every day, sometimes 3 times a day. So this has been going on ever since the beginning of November. And thirdly, or fourthly, so that's some of what's going on in education. He's also in education, become a professor with Ubiquity University, which Garrison is the president of Ubiquity, and it was the first global online university where you could get masters and PhDs in very interesting topics that you couldn't get them anyplace else. They've now started an ET studies program at Ubiquity. You can get a master's and a PhD, only place in the world, and Danny was the first professor. He's done his 8 classes, and Richard Dolan is going to do 8 classes, and then there'll be more and more professors from different fields until there's a whole program of ET studies. Why? Because we know that as this unfolds, people all over the world are going to need help understanding it. And the more educated people that we have out there in communities everywhere who can help people wrap their brain around this, the better. So that's what we're doing with Ubiquity. So in terms of education, it's all moving right now. Organizing what we're doing is we started a Citizens for Disclosure movement. The goal for that of is to have a local action team in every single congressional district in the country. There's 435 of them, and we've already got them in several of those. And also to have a state leader in every state. We're doing this based on the National Organization for Women, which I used to for the structure. And then in addition to the state leaders, we're going to go for a national alliance. So and as I'm telling you these things, these are ways that you can participate, or you may know other people who can participate. If you've got an organization, let's bring it into the alliance. If you know people who want to organize locally, let's get a team going. These are already happening, but we just need to keep growing and growing. New York, where is it? Where is it here? The green one. New York had a rally. They have a team. And they actually had a rally at Schumer's office. And they found an artist who did all these posters. And And they're willing to provide posters to people all over the country that are gonna have their teams. I mean, they'll just send them the link, you can print your own poster. And if you need something special done for Arizona, they'll do an Arizona one. And so they're trying to help everybody else get started by providing tools and experience, etc. So now, in terms of the alliance, eventually this alliance, I see this alliance as being wonderful, where lots of organizations are involved, lots of interfaith groups, you know, the big national organizations, and then scientists for disclosure, academics for disclosure, lawyers for disclosure, you know, everybody for disclosure in groups. Think of like 9/11 with the architects for disclosure. They came together because they knew, and the engineers, they knew there was something wrong with how those buildings fell down. Well, the same thing is true with this. There's going to be a lot of different constituencies that have a reason. The scientists, the academics, these people are really like, why haven't we known about this? Why haven't the best physicists in the world been involved in this? Why are we all kept out of this? Why aren't we participating? So everybody's, you know, got a different reason maybe, but so that's the kind of alliance. And then for the first time, which we've never done before, we're going to do a global alliance. And Jim is already working with 7 people who are from 7 different countries because they want their parliaments to pass a law like we did, which Danny will tell you about. We did here. That law is passed. Disclosure has begun. They want to pass one too in their countries. And so he's working with them. He's also working with leaders in 7 different, well, six different of the major faiths: Buddhist, Tao, Hindu, the Abrahamics, and I think there's one other one. And then also we're going to be working with the indigenous people, because the indigenous people have stories. I mean, in North and South America, they say we come from the Pleiades. In Egypt, it's Orion. There's a part of Africa where the Dogons, that they say we're from Sirius. And so there's a lot of this, but it needs to be gathered together in a systematic academic way. And so that project is being developed. And so all of this is going on. In the meantime, in Washington, there's a lot of work, which Danny will talk about, with the legislators to get better policy, more bills passed, more public hearings. So all of that is going on. So, I wonder if anybody's been able to hear me.
The feedback we've got 60 people in the Zoom room. They're hearing you, but it's slightly muffled, so a little bit clearer would be great.
All right, thank you. So this gives you some idea of the kind of scope of this that we are trying to do. And of course, we're starting fundraising events around the country. If you have any people, if you yourself can help with this, or you have any contacts who can, we're doing one in New York, we're doing one in LA, we're doing one in DC, and we're going to keep going all around the country. So, because what we need everybody to join this movement, to support it in any way you can, and to help us make this happen. And I'm going to turn it over to Danny now. I think most of you know who he is, but I just want to say he is probably, I mean, he's the most well-known and experienced constitutional attorney in the country who is an advocate for the people. Always an advocate for the people, which is what the name of his book is. And he's done some of the most historic cases. He's been on those teams or initiated and led them himself, with the Pentagon Papers, Watergate, with Silkwood, with Greensboro, with Sanctuary, with Iran-Contra. All of these cases were significantly impacted by his brilliant ability to strategize and understand what the most important step was to take at any given legal point. And I've seen him over and over again respond to people who come to him just for, can I talk with you for an hour? And in 1 hour, they are just so grateful because he can analyze something very quickly and tell them what it is that needs to be done. And we are very fortunate that he has devoted his life to the citizens, which is what's happened. And he has 50 years of experience in this field, and is very well positioned to help us all get this done. So, yeah.
So is this going? Can everybody hear me? The mic is up? Okay.
Danny,
Yeah.
that mic is only going to the camera.
You want to use this one? Oh, I see.
Let's also bring the mic stand over close to him so that Scott has the audio.
All right. All right. So is this one here?
Yeah, that's to the PA in the room.
All right. Good. All right, good. So this one's going out to the people out there, all right?
Yeah, the one that's on your tie is going out to YouTube and live streaming. The one that's on the wand needs to be a little bit closer to your mouth, and Dan's doing.
Oh, yeah, this has got to be closer, so it won't be getting muffled, right?
Yeah, Dan Grayson's assisting there.
Does everybody understand what an amazing life this man has led? Yeah?
Well, as long as people aren't talking about me in the past tense. I would make it clear that everything that we've been doing over the last 50 years or so has all been leading up to this.
Yeah.
Right from the very beginning, one of the initial cases that I did was the case that, as you probably have heard, is the case that went all the way to the United States Supreme Court and established the right of journalists to protect their confidential news sources, so that we could get at information that was buried and hidden inside corporations. Pentagon Papers is inside the Pentagon, inside the national security state. This is the kind of practice that I ended up beginning right coming out of Harvard Law School, where I was a co-founder with Mark Green out of New York, a founder of the Harvard Civil Rights Law Review. And this got to be a very particular kind of practice because I discovered in reading all 47 volumes of the Pentagon Papers that it turns out that it wasn't just that, like 4 different administrations, Republican and Democratic alike, have been lying to us all about the origins of the Vietnam War, what the objectives were of the Vietnam War, of how the war was being conducted, but also the fact that they were secretly engaged in a massive political assassination program that killed over 20,000 non-combatant civilians there, and that they were smuggling heroin out of Southeast Asia to sell in the United States. And to use the financing of portions of that to purchase more weapons for the assassination program that was going on. So right from the very beginning, that I ended up getting into kind of a very specialized kind of practice, and so it led to a number of other major cases. Very quickly, that led on into the Watergate burglary case. I went directly from the major law firm that represented the New York Times and NBC News, where we had established the right of journalists to protect confidential news sources. We went on to do the Pentagon Papers case out of that particular firm for the New York Times. And then I was recruited by the Office of Beverly Bailey to go to his law firm to represent James McCord, who was the CIA wiretapping specialist who was caught inside the Watergate Hotel, wiretapping the telephones and placing the electronic listening devices in the offices of Larry O'Brien, who was the head of the Democratic National Committee. So, as I say, right at the very beginning of my legal practice, I ended up getting into kind of this specialized area of trying to determine what the national security state, or the deep state, as some people refer to them, were really up to, as distinct from what they were telling the rest of the country. And this led to a number of other cases. Sarah has touched upon a couple of them, that we did the Karen Silkwood case, for example, in Oklahoma, that caught the Central Intelligence Agency and Senator Robert S. Kerr and his people, who was the owner of the Kerr-McGee Nuclear Corporation, who also happened to be the head of the Senate Armed Services Committee in the United States Senate, smuggling but 98% pure bomb-grade plutonium to the state of Israel and to Iran, just to make things topical. We've been engaged in these kind of cases down through the decades now. And people kept asking us that, well, how in the world did you get involved in something as strange as this issue about UFOs? Isn't it clear that if you get involved with the UFO issue, that people are going to question your credibility? And what our response was, what does it take to establish credibility? I mean, if we've only had like a whole series of major national, special Senate select committees be called, in the Watergate case, in the Iran-Contra case, had major hearings in the Congress over the Silkwood case. We shut down the major nuclear reprocessing plant in the entire country where they were smuggling plutonium to Israel. I mean, how many things do you need to do to establish credibility? And the key is that during the conducting of all of those cases, sort of during the week, I took weekends off to be going to conferences that had to do with the UFO issue, because I knew right from the very beginning that this was going to be one of the most extraordinarily important issues in our entire history as a human family. That I remember that when I came to school back in 1963, that was before some of you were here even were born, and probably many of you who are listening now. When I came out of high school, I ended up the #1 nominee for the United States Air Force Academy for New York State, which is a brand new academy of the service at that time. And I went down to interview in New York City for the senatorial appointment. They get the senators appoint some of the people to the academies, and then the Congress people appoint somebody. So I got to go to the United States Senator's office and interview with Senator Jacob Javits. And Jacob Javits, when he asked me why I wanted to go to the Air Force Academy, I told him that I wanted to become an astronaut. And he said, "Oh yes, 1963, John Glenn, orbiting the Earth, and all red-blooded American boys want to be astronauts." That was back before they even thought about women being astronauts. And so I said, I want to become an astronaut because I want to go into outer space so that I can get to meet the other people, the other beings from other star systems in our galaxy here. And he actually said, he says, "You actually believe that there's other living beings out in our galaxy?" And I said, "Well, sure. I mean, so do you. I mean, like, you're a United States Senator. You've got to understand that." And he was kind of flabbergasted that I would say that to him when I was 18 years old. Especially when I was trying to get him to appointment to the Air Force. But the bottom line is that he was kind of thunderstruck about the whole thing. He offered me the appointment to the United States Naval Academy and said that, "Look, I want to be clear with you." He said that I shouldn't tell you this, but I've already given the appointment to the Air Force Academy to someone else, and I wasn't supposed to do that before I interviewed you. He said, "But I gave the appointment to the son of one of my major financial backers." He said, "That's the way the government really works, Dan." He said, "You need to really understand that." He says, "So you can just go to the Naval Academy and you can get to be an astronaut through the naval flight training." And I said, "No, I'm not into boats." I said, "I'm into airplanes." And so the bottom line, he says, "You can go get your congressional appointment and still go to the academy." And he said, "Look, you need to know that whether you've been appointed by the senator or by the congressman, after a year at the academy, nobody really knows anyhow. So it's not going to make that much difference," he said. But it turns out that the congressman gave the appointment to the son of the Republican mayor of Glens Falls, who was one of his major supporters. And I realized, I've said this to some of you before, that I realized that I'd have to become a lawyer. Because this wasn't working right. The government didn't seem to be quite in tune, that it was out of tune. And so I thought that I would just go and become a lawyer, and I would work for a few years and help get the country back in tune. And then I would get to go back and be an astronaut. Well, it turns out that the particular kind of practice that I got into coming out of Harvard Law School, I discovered within just a matter of a few years that the country wasn't really out of tune. Turns out that it was playing a completely different song. than we had been taught in high school and even in college. It turns out that there was this whole other dynamic going on with our United States government. And so that even while I was doing these other cases, in the Watergate burglary case and the Pentagon Papers case and the Karen Silkwood case, the Iran-Contra case and other things, I still made myself available for doing other more important things. And because of that, I ended up going back to Harvard to study for a master's degree and PhD degree in the field of comparative social ethics, because I realized that the ethics that were being pursued and implemented by most of the people in the legal field were different than mine. They didn't seem to be really interested in genuinely protecting the Constitution of the United States. I mean, most of them thought that the Constitution was the USS Constitution that sits in the harbor in Boston. And so I was genuinely devoted to trying to protect the Constitution, protect civil rights and human rights, et cetera. And they were operating on a different wavelength entirely. So I ended up going back to Harvard to do the master's work to start with, and ended up getting recruited to come to Washington, D.C. to become general counsel to the United States Jesuit headquarters in their National Social Ministry Office, which had to do with public policy, dealing with all the major public policy challenges. And ironically enough, or not, it turns out that while I was there, I ended up being contacted immediately after the election of President Carter. President Carter was elected in November of 1976, on November 4th, and on the 19th of November of 1976, he sent to the Central Intelligence Agency after being elected president and ordered the director of the Central Intelligence Agency to come down to Plains, Georgia, and brief him on the UFO issue and the issue of extraterrestrial intelligence. And it turns out that the CIA director at that time was George H.W. Bush. And it turns out that he refused to brief the president, refused to tell him what the information was that the CIA had and the national security state people had on the UFO phenomenon. And he said he didn't have a need to know that as president. And so what Carter did is he went to Congress and got the Science and Technology Committee of the House of Representatives to contact the Congressional Research Service and have the Science and Technology Division of the Congressional Research Service undertake a major study for the president on the issue of UFOs and what their connection might be to any extraterrestrial intelligence that existed here inside our galaxy. And I got contacted by Dr. Marcia Smith, who was the director of the Science and Technology Division of the Congressional Research Service, in my capacity as general counsel at the Jesuit National Headquarters in their public policy office, and was asked to contact the Vatican and see if we could get access to the information that the Vatican had in Rome about UFOs and about extraterrestrial intelligence. And so I got clearance to do that from the superiors at the Jesuit headquarters, a very important issue of the largest order inside the Catholic Church, which is the largest single religious denomination in all of Western civilization. To have the largest single order in the church authorize us to participate in that kind of a discussion was extraordinarily important. And it was in that context that I ended up getting access to the classified portions of Project Blue Book. Project Blue Book was originally a secret investigation conducted by the United States Air Force from 1952, all the way up to 1967. And that in that study, they encountered over 700 incidents of sightings of UFOs that they were totally unable to discredit, though they went to great lengths to do so with regard to virtually all the other sightings that they had. And they were attributing them to, flocks of birds being, misidentified as flying saucers, to a floodlight shining on the bottom of clouds, to swamp gas, famously. There were 700 of these that they were completely unable to explain away. I ended up getting access to the classified portions of Project Blue Book. And there I saw the photographs, official photographs of an actual UFO crash retrieval that was underway. And because of that, I knew what they were doing, and I brought the information back to the Jesuit headquarters, shared it with my immediate superior, Father William J. Davis, who was my superior in the Jesuit headquarters, and he actually leaned down and opened up the drawer on his desk and took out a little 8.5 by 11 manila envelope and handed it to me. And I unclasped it and slid out a photograph, an 8.5 by 11 black and white glossy photograph of a UFO, which he had in his desk. And I said, where did you get this? And he said, my sister Dodie gave it to me. And I said, well, where did Dodie get it? And he said, well, Mike gave it to her husband. He is the air traffic controller at the Seattle airport. And his best friend, who is a cargo pilot who flies cargo all around the Northwest, took this photograph out of the window of his plane. And he was afraid once he got it developed. I mean, that was back in the days when you bring your little brownie camera to the drugstore and you get it developed. And when he realized the picture that he had, he didn't want to report it because he thought he would get in trouble and possibly lose his pilot's license, which is a point we'll come to talk about here. And so he ended up bringing it to his best friend, Mike, who was the air traffic controller at the Seattle airport, saying, okay, I've done my duty here. You've got it now. And of course, Mike didn't want to get in trouble. So what he did is took it and gave it to his wife, Dodie. And he said, here, Dodie, bring this to your brother and give it to him. He's a priest. So you have a couple incidents right here, right immediately, where the pilots didn't dare report this. Even though there are UFOs flying around in the sky, they didn't dare do anything about it because, as it turns out, the United States Air Force and the Central Intelligence Agency and the Joint Special Operations Command of the Pentagon had all undertaken a deeply secret program of concealing this information and taking retribution against anybody who tried to make official reports about UFOs. They would, in fact, challenge your pilot's license. They would, in fact, take you out of your job as the air traffic controller in Seattle if you tried to file these reports. And these people knew that. Okay. And the fact is that it did mean something when people said, look, I can't take these photographs to anybody officially in the government, but bring them to your brother. He's a priest, and you say, what does that mean? Why do people have that kind of reaction? Like priests ought to be interested in this particular issue. And so from that point on, I became dedicated in my professional life as of the spring of 1977 to actually begin to go to some of these conferences, to begin to find out some of these things. And I was contacted by Dr. John Mack, who was the head of the Department of Clinical Psychiatry at Harvard Medical School, and asked to legally represent him because he had been the doctor, the psychiatrist, to whom the United States Air Force had sent a number of the people, high-ranking military officers, who happened to insist upon filing these reports. For example, in 1967, a UFO came up over the top of a Minuteman Minuteman missile site up in Montana, in Malmstrom, at the Malmstrom Air Force Base. And it's kind of an interesting story, as you might guess, that a UFO came up over the top of the Minuteman base, and the Bob Salas, Captain Bob Salas, who was down in the hole, they call it, down underground, where he was in charge of releasing the missiles, that he got a call from his people up above saying there's some kind of extraordinary, huge, saucer-shaped thing, that's coming in over the top of the fence here at our facility. And Captain Salas says, you're armed, aren't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, yes, you know, we have like M16, he says, well, then secure the perimeter. You
Oh,
know,
God.
and then he hung up on him. And so that, actually, a couple minutes later, the phone rings again and the people up on top are hysterical. And he said, I've got injured people here. I've got injured people. They are trying to climb out of the facility over the razor wire. And get out of the facility. They're so afraid of this, and all of a sudden, instantly, all 10 missiles, they're all independently wired, all of a sudden go offline. Bam, 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 one after another, completely turn them all off. Major, the major, Arnoldson, tried to contact NORAD to tell them that their missiles had been turned off. He's trying to report to them what had happened. So they said to him, he said, are you trying to report a UFO sighting? And he said, that was the most important moment of my life. He said, because I said to him, yes, I am. Okay. And NORAD said, well, that's really interesting because the Nikes, the Minuteman site to your east and to your west had just reported exactly the same thing. That a UFO has also come up over their facilities and shut off all their missiles. And Arnie Arlenson tried to report this higher up in the command, and nobody would do anything about it. And so I ended up eventually taking him to his congressperson and sitting down with his congressperson and having him tell his congressperson about this. And the congressperson said, well, you know, I know that a lot of people here on the Hill are really interested in this subject, but none of them dare talk about it. Because they know if they talk about it, suddenly millions of dollars will appear mysteriously in their congressional district and be put into the opponent, and they'll be out of office. And so nobody will talk about this. So I became devoted to trying to figure out what we're going to do about this. And then as I said, I ended up being contacted by Dr. John Mack, because he is the fellow to whom a lot of these high-ranking officers who insisted upon filing reports were sent for psychiatric examinations. Because the very first thing they would do if you insisted upon filing one of these complaints is the United States Air Force would mandate that you get a psychiatric exam. And as I said before, it's not exactly a career builder, you know, they reported to get a psychiatric exam. And what they would do is say, oh, well, you know, if you're going to be filing a really important report like this, the first thing we have to do is really demonstrate that you're psychologically healthy. You know, that was their pretense for this. Right. So John would have these people sent to him. And so John at Harvard Medical School, you know, would conduct these a full battery of psychiatric exams of these people. And then he kept being kind of flabbergasted at the stories they were telling him. And he later said, he contacted me later because he was so fascinated by the stories that he was telling or finding out about. They ended up contacting his family, his mom, and called her. And he said, look at this really interesting thing is happening here. I'm getting all these reports from these high-level officers. And his mother said, oh, you should talk to the Hopkins boy, the friends of the family, the Hopkins family, the Bud Hopkins, who's a friend of the family, is got kind of a hobby here. He's from a very wealthy family. He's kind of an artist and sculptor, but he's down in New York City, and he's been going around interviewing people who believe that they've had actual contacts with some of these UFO vehicles and have actually may have encountered beings coming out of these craft. And so John ended up calling Bud Hopkins, and Bud Hopkins spent a number of months, you know, bringing people to John Mack. And John ended up interviewing like 100 people and weeded through some of them. Some of the people were a little unstable. Some people were kind of wannabes. But the fact of the matter is he ended up having this whole core of people who were absolutely convincing. And they were completely credible people, you know, that were professionals in all kinds of careers, that it was not at all helpful to their career either to report this. So
what percentage were they cutting implants?
Pardon?
What percentage were they cutting implants? Some of them had implants that were being.
Well, that's a whole subdivision. Yeah, and I'll talk about it later. But the bottom line is, what I'm saying is that he ended up saying, look, this is an extraordinarily important thing that's going on here. And what he did is he prepared a paper, a white paper, to a professional paper, scientific study, to be submitted to the New England Journal of Medicine. And he submits the paper, and they ended up sending it back to him, saying they weren't going to be printing it. And so he was kind of taken aback, since after all, he was a Pulitzer Prize winner. He won the Pulitzer Prize for doing the definitive psychobiography of T.E. Lawrence, Lawrence of Arabia. He won the Pulitzer Prize for this, and he published over 100 papers, scientific papers before, in the New England Journal of Medicine, wouldn't print it. So he revisited the paper and he put in a bunch more footnotes and dug in and did a lot more data on it, and he resubmitted it to them. And 2 days later, the executive secretary of the editor-in-chief of the New England Journal of Medicine shows up at his office and said, you know, Dr. Relman has ordered me to bring this back to you and to note that it's unopened. We've not even reopened your envelope. We're not going to publish this. No matter what you say, we're going to publish it. And so John got terribly upset, and he called a publisher and got it published. And the day after it was published as a book, the book publishing company designated it as Abductions, Human Contact with Aliens, right? And the dean of the medical school comes into John's office and said, John, he said, that's really interesting. I heard that you published this book about people you've interviewed who believe they've had contact with extraterrestrial beings from flying saucers. And John said, yes, as a matter of fact, I have. And the dean said, well, you know, I'd like to really talk with you about this. And as long as you and I are going to be talking about it, why don't we invite some of the faculty to come together and we can discuss this? And John said, this is great. This is great. I'm going to get to do like a grand rounds here at Harvard Medical School on this extraordinarily important issue. And he shows up at the dean's office, and the dean ushers him into this room. And here is this tribunal that has been convened, you know, and there's like 5 people sitting on this tribunal, and chairing this tribunal is Arnold Relman, who is the editor-in-chief of the New England Journal of Medicine, who refused to publish this article, and he's chairing the panel. And here's the legal counsel for Harvard University sitting to his immediate right, and then 3 other faculty members who don't like him, and he knew they didn't, and they start to excoriate him, right, for ruining the reputation of Harvard University, besmirching their reputation as the citadel of knowledge and Western civilization in their own eyes. So the bottom line is, he ends up calling his best friend, whom I happen to know, and his best friend says to him, why don't you call Danny Sheehan and have him represent you in front of the committee? Said, you know, Danny's done all these cases, you know, he's graduated from Harvard College, he graduated from Harvard Law School, he's gone to Harvard Divinity School, you know, and done his work there. And now he's done all these big cases. Why don't you call him and see if he'll represent? And so Ron Robertson, who's his best friend, his best man at his wedding for him and Sally, calls me and asked me whether I'd be willing to talk with John Mack. And John, I said, sure. So John calls me, and I end up legally representing him. Okay. We go before this committee, you know, we go to the next meeting, we walk in, and immediately Relman starts, you know, interrogating him again. I said, excuse me. I said, I'm not clear exactly what the nature of this hearing really is. I said, it's certainly not an AAUP convened hearing. The American Association of University Professors has standards that you have to abide by if you're going to actually be challenging a tenured professor. You know, and he said, and Art Relman says, oh, no. He says, this is just, you know, that the dean of the medical school here, just when the book was published, he started getting a number of calls from different people, and they were asking him questions, and he didn't know how to answer their questions. And he just thought that he might as well have a conversation with John about this. And if he's going to have a conversation, why don't we have some other people from the faculty here just to kind of chat with him? You know, here they are arrayed as a tribunal with the legal counsel for Harvard University. He's trying to pass off this story that this is just a chat, right? And so I said, look, whatever the nature of this whole process is, I said, can you tell me, are either one or another of the 2 following fact questions going to be at issue here? Number 1, whether or not extraterrestrial intelligence exists. And number two, whether or not at least some of these sightings of UFOs might actually be a vehicle from an extraterrestrial civilization. And Harville Feldman says, well, absolutely, both of those issues are going to be relevant to this hearing, and it's absolutely ridiculous to think that either one of those things can be true.
Oh,
That's what he says. We're talking 1994, Harvard University declares that it's ridiculous to think that there might be extraterrestrial life. Okay, and so here we have it. And so I say, well, in that case, then I should be, clear with you that John and I just spent the weekend with Lawrence Rockefeller, and Lawrence Rockefeller has agreed to fund, complete grand rounds here at Harvard, on this particular issue. And, we'll call witnesses, we'll call the chief investigator for the Federal Aviation Agency, we'll call military officers, we'll call police officers, and school teachers, librarians, we'll call all kinds of people from all kinds of walks of life who will provide testimony to you about this. The lawyer for Harvard University leaps to her feet and she says, absolutely not. We're not going to allow these proceedings to be turned into some kind of circus. And I said, well, that's it. I guess we're done here. And so John and I got up and walked out. And we had this confrontation that went on for the next 18 months with Harvard University. And I, fortunately, got to be introduced by Dr. John Mack to virtually every major expert in the world about the UFO phenomenon, right? As witnesses, as potential witnesses, to prepare them to come and testify at Harvard University on the issue of UFOs. And so I was extraordinarily blessed to get to be in that position. I got to meet, Stanton Friedman. I got to meet Bud Hopkins. I got to meet David Jacobs. I got to meet, Linda Moulton Howe. I got to meet Stephen Greer. I got to meet, everybody that you can imagine in the field. And John Mack made me legal counsel for his project on extraordinary experience research, which he set up there in Cambridge. And so I got to meet dozens of people who were extraordinarily credible witnesses who had had these extraordinary experiences of actually encountering a UFO in various places. Travis Walton, these and all these people that you've heard about. I didn't get to meet Betty and Barney Hill right away, but I got to meet almost everybody else, and I was preparing them all to be witnesses until Harvard University finally collapsed in the face of this proffer, and basically apologized to him and let it go. But he ended up being on Oprah Winfrey, since her show, and talking to people. So all of a sudden, it became more and more prominent about what was going on here. And so because of that, I ended up being contacted by Dr. Stephen Greer, and I became legal counsel for the Disclosure Project. And this was the major project in which we had interviewed literally hundreds of people from all walks of life and all levels of authority inside the culture about this. And we culled out 24 of these people and presented them at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C., to all of the staff members of Congress, and presented them. And in that context, I got to interview Sergeant Clifford Stone. Clifford Stone had been part of a major crash retrieval program in the United States military and had been to a half a dozen crash sites and had recovered bodies and testified to us all about these things, right? So this isn't brand new news that we're talking about here. This was in 2001 that we laid all this out in May, on May 6th of 2001. We laid out all of this information. And because of this, I ended up being legal counsel later in 2013 to the citizens hearings on disclosure, and we presented 40 witnesses to former members of the House and Senate in major hearings, which were all recorded and televised, and we put them out across the country. And because of that, I was contacted by Lou Elizondo here. When Lou, in 2017, decided he was going to go to the New York Times, and as the head of the top secret program inside the Pentagon, they've been studying these things, for example, and this from 2008 all the way to 2017, that he had been the head of this major secret project inside the Pentagon. And he was so upset over the fact that they wouldn't do anything about this. He couldn't understand it. He couldn't understand why they wouldn't do anything about UFOs coming over the top of Minuteman missile sites, turning off all their missiles, and they wouldn't allow anybody to talk about it. You know, and they discovered that not only that, but they were coming and going from the oceans. You know, that they were, as Sarah had mentioned, they would come down from over 80,000 feet, and they would come all the way down to the surface of the ocean in 0.7 of a second.
My God.
And stop dead like that. And then go underwater and travel at over 100 miles an hour underwater. And they were being monitored by radar. And F-18 Super Hornets were following them around and videoing them through their gun cameras. And the nuclear submarines were actually monitoring them under the water and tracking them with radar. And yet it was being kept secret. And so that what happened is Lou got totally upset about this. And Lou brought 3 of these videos that are now the kind of famous videos of the Tic Tac and the Go Fast and the gimbal. And he brought them to the New York Times along with who was it? Christopher Mellon. He went with Chris Mellon. Christopher Mellon was the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence in both the Clinton administration and in the George Bush Jr. administration. Here is the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Intelligence going with the director of the top secret program inside the Pentagon and bringing these videotapes to the New York Times. And the New York Times, very importantly, agrees to publish them. Okay, so right away, the Pentagon starts issuing lying statements saying, we don't know who Lou Elizondo is.
Oh.
We've never heard of Lou Elizondo. We don't know what program he's talking about. There is no such program. Just complete blatant lies. And so Lou ends up contacting me. And he asked me to represent him legally and file a complaint with the Inspector General of the United States Defense Department. And we did. And we go to the Inspector General's office. And the Inspector General's office does not want to hear about this, does not want to hear about the complaint, does not want to hear about the UFO program. But we get in there to sit down with the Inspector General, and within 3 minutes, this kind of hostile, resistant atmosphere that we found immediately turns out to be just their jaw dropping. And here's Lou telling them about what's going on. And so the Inspector General starts sending for more and more of his staff to come into the room, they'll get around the table, and then all of a sudden military officers start coming in with all their, medals and things, sitting around the table. And we ended up starting to do grand rounds for the United States Pentagon, telling the other people who had been read out of this program for all of these years about what it is that was going on. And this begins the new storm that has led us here today, where Congress has now begun talking with some of the people deep inside the programs that have been going on now. And they've now verified that the crash that has been reported so widely that took place at Roswell, New Mexico, back on July 8th of 1947 was absolutely true. And it turns out that we have succeeded in actually blowing up the telegraph that was sent to General Ramey, who was in charge of the fake weather balloon story, where he ended up sending for the photographer from the Roswell newspaper and ordering them to come to the base and laid out a bunch of debris from a crashed weather balloon and said, here's what really crashed. It wasn't a flying saucer. Like, here's the people that are in charge of the only nuclear weapons site on the planet, the 509th Bomber Group in Roswell, where the Enola Gay was launched from to bomb Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the only place on the planet with nuclear weapons. And here they are, they're supposed to not be able to tell the difference between a weather balloon, and a flying saucer, okay, who have issued a public statement that they've got a flying saucer in custody now, okay? And so that what we've done, we've started to unravel all of these different stories that people have heard down through the years. And we've been presenting them now, not only to the Pentagon people and to the Inspector General's office, but we've been presenting them to the members of Congress, to the Senate Intelligence Committee and the House Oversight Committee. And they've now started holding hearings. And that they on July 26th, they held a hearing where Sarah had referred to Colonel Grush, David Grush, Colonel Grush was a major high-ranking officer in the global, I call it the space,
Geospatial.
geospatial intelligence center. Okay, so he's a major guy in the geospatial intelligence center. And he then goes over to the National Reconnaissance Office and is a major official, and then gets assigned to the secret UFO investigation. And he comes before the Congress and tells them that, you know, I've interviewed over 40 different people, and I know I can come here and testify to you under oath that we have recovered. And just stop and think, if this were the single major headline you heard about this, here it is. Congress is told by one of the head guys inside the Pentagon, we're in possession of a non-human interstellar spacecraft, and the bodies of people recovered from the crash retrieval, and they're non-human. You would assume that is going to go bingo like this all across the world, that they've discovered this, but no, because what's happened is that they've got this suppression program going on out of the Pentagon and out of the intelligence community to threaten people. And believe that they're going to have their careers ruined, or they're going to be ordered to go get psychiatric exams as a condition for being able to continue their jobs in the government. And so what we're doing now is we're engaged in a major process. We've established this the new Paradigm Institute. We've set it up inside the organization here, the Romero Institute, which, as Sarah pointed out to you, is the progeny of our Christic Institute. And our Christic Institute is what we established out of the Jesuit National Headquarters, you know, all the way back in 1980, working on the Karen Silkwood case. And that through which we conducted the other cases, investigating the Greensboro murders. We did the first American Sanctuary Movement defenses down on the border, the Mexican border down in Texas. You know, we did the Iran-Contra case out of there. You know, and just because George Bush Sr., now then president, ordered them to revoke our 501c3 tax exempt charter, you know, we within days were contacted by the Romero Foundation out of California, and they said they had when they heard that Bush had ordered the revocation of our 501c3 tax exempt charter as the Christic Institute, the Romero Foundation held an emergency meeting of their board of directors and voted for me to be their president, Sarah to be their vice president, and Father William Davis, who was our secretary treasurer, to be their secretary treasurer, and then they all resigned, so that we became the Romero Foundation and renamed it the Romero Institute. And so we've been conducting ourselves, you know, ever since then as the Romero Institute, and we have set up this new Paradigm Institute as a wholly integrated auxiliary of our institute that is entitled to full 501c3 tax exempt status. We're now hiring people to come on board this particular investigation. We have over 550 volunteers now that we're now coordinating and putting into different groups. We have 30 professors from universities, PhD professors from universities that are all being coordinated. We have 18 attorneys they're all working out and being trained by the top level of whistleblower defense attorneys in the country to protect new whistleblowers. We're working on the legislation in Washington, D.C. We've established the Washington, D.C. office. We're the only civilian office inside the federal enclave, right on Capitol Hill. Immediately to our left is the United States Supreme Court, and immediately to our right is the Hart Senate Office Building, the location of the Senate Intelligence Committee. You know, across the street, you could literally throw a baseball across the street to the Capitol building. I wouldn't advise it, but you know, but the bottom line is that that's where we are, and we're engaged in regular meetings with the staff people. We're working on a bill, and what has come out of that. This is extraordinarily important. Here it is. Here, this is the 64-page bill, sponsored by Chuck Schumer, right here. Okay, the majority leader of the United States Senate, and it's co-sponsored by Mike Rounds, the extremely conservative United States Republican senator from South Dakota, okay, whose co-senator in South Dakota, John Thune, is the one who is likely to be getting ready to take the place of Mitch McConnell when Mitch McConnell steps down as the minority leader in the Senate. So we've gotten ourselves structured so that this bill actually is the gold standard. This is the compromise that has been struck among all the different negotiations that have gone on to put together the 64-page bill. And what this does is, number one, it commands by Congress, commands all 6 of the United States military services, Army, Navy, Air Force, Coast Guard, the new Space Force, all of the major Marine Corps, all of the major military services, and all 18 of the United States intelligence agencies, all 32 of the United States Defense Department agencies, and all of the private aerospace corporations who have come into possession of any information whatsoever pertaining to the UFO phenomenon and to the non-human intelligence that is associated with the UFO phenomenon, commands them to turn over every single piece of information they have and have ever had since January 1st of 1945.
Wow.
To turn this over to the Congress and to turn it over to the National Archives. And it's going to be put in there, and they're commanded within 300 days of the passage of the statute to compile all of this information into a digital format with an index that is searchable through computers, and to turn it over to the National Archives so that the members of the Senate Intelligence Committee and the House Intelligence Committee and Oversight Committee can inspect this information. And what the bill provides for is that every single piece of information, every email, every phone call, every internal memo, every investigative memo that they've got, every field report, every photograph of every single crash recovery, that it has to be turned over within 300 days of the passage of the statute, which was dated on December 22nd of 2023. All right, so that falls on October 18th, a date a little known to anybody in the country right now, but on October 18th of this year, it's mandated that every single piece of information that is 25 years old or more has to be immediately turned over to the public. Okay, unless the President of the United States himself specifically intervenes and prohibits it and postpones the immediate release of that piece of information. And it mandates that he would then have to give an account of why it is he's postponing this. But the fact is, even that information has to be released within a 7-year period. And all the other information that is newer than 25 years, from basically 1998 up to now, also has to be put into a special program. Then there's going to be appointed by the president a 9-person board of review of all of those records that are 25 years or younger. And they're going to review all of them with the presumption that every single piece of such information is going to be revealed to the public. Okay? This is an absolutely extraordinary piece of legislation. And it has proposed all of these things. And our office, that is referred to specifically in the statute as the UAP Disclosure Foundation, which we own the domain for here out of the New Paradigm Institute, that are responsible for nominating to the president who the members of that 9-person board are going to be. Okay, and this is quite extraordinary. I mean, this puts you into direct contact through the New Paradigm Institute with the process by means of which those people will be selected. Okay, and these people then also, in addition to making the decision as to which of the information that is newer than 25 years old is going to be revealed to the public, which they're authorized to do. Again, unless the president himself intervenes, and that's going to be Joe Biden between now October 18th is what the date is that this decision has to be made pursuant to the statute, right? And that they have the authority to mandate the public release of that information. All right, unless the president intervenes. So that is what is provided for in this particular statute, 64 pages long, and it was passed unanimously by the United States Senate Intelligence Committee. All 17 members of the Senate Intelligence Committee, all 9 members of the Democratic Party, and all 8 members of the Republican Party in the United States Senate unanimously approved this decision, is to go through this thing. In addition to doing all that, they are assigned the responsibility, the 9-person board, to actually design a UFO controlled disclosure campaign to be undertaken by the president. Okay, and that this is going to go on for a period of 7 years to reveal this information to the world. Now, this is an absolutely paradigm-shattering event that is actually being proposed by the United States Senate. Now, what happened is that this passed virtually unanimously in the United States Senate, with only 11 votes against it, which were primarily votes against some other part of the National Defense Authorization Act, actually, not even opposing to this. Okay, and so what happened is it went over to the House side. In the House, the Republican head of the chairman of the House Intelligence Committee, a man named Michael Turner, who is out of the 10th Congressional District in Ohio, ended up saying he was opposed to this being passed. It turns out that he comes from the Congressional District in Ohio, which is the Congressional District of the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. The Wright-Patterson Air Force Base is the biggest Air Force base in the world, and it is the base to which the crash saucer at Roswell was taken, according to the telegram that was in the hand of General Ramey, which was photographed actually that night. Okay, and then he has recruited the Republican head of the chairman of the House Armed Services Committee, whose name is Michael Rogers, who is from the 3rd Congressional District over in Alabama, which is right next door to the Congressional District where the Redstone Arsenal is, the Redstone Rocket Range, where they're actually trying to develop a major top secret program called Prompt Global Strike, where they're trying to utilize the propulsion system of the technology that's been recovered from the UFO spacecraft to propel United States nuclear missiles, so that they can launch a missile from the United States and hit into the heart of Russia or China in 2 minutes. An absolute first strike nuclear weapon that totally destroys the entire geopolitical structure that has been put together over decades to prevent first strike nuclear weapons from being developed. So that these people are in fact attempting to back engineer the technology from the recovered UFO spacecraft to make weapons in complete violation of the nuclear non-first strike treaties that exist. So what's happening now is because of the opposition of these 2 men, of Michael Turner, the Republican head of the House Intelligence Committee, and this guy Michael Rogers, they have joined together to get Mike Johnson, who is this new hanging by his fingernails Speaker of the House that you've heard so little about. This is the guy who refused to put this bill onto the floor of the House, even though basically out of the 435 members of the House of Representatives, like 430 of them support this bill, but he will not put it on the floor because their campaigns are being paid for by the private aerospace industry. Okay, because it turns out that the district Huntsville, where the Michael Rogers comes from, is the major international headquarters for Radiance Technology, which is the private aerospace corporation that is trying to develop Prompt Global Strike. Okay, so that what we're looking at here is that this most extraordinary piece of information about the existence of an extraterrestrial civilization with people that are vastly more advanced than we are technologically is being held secret so they can make weapons out of this program. okay, and not allow us to even know about the existence of this civilization, to read us out and to read out all of Congress, and even to read out presidents from knowing about this. That means that the national security state is completely out of control here. It's out from under all constitutional constraints. And so that we as citizens have to organize from an upward, positive, forward perspective to promulgate the positive features of reaching out to the stars here, to reaching out to the members of an extraterrestrial civilization, to try to establish peaceful relations with them, to get our United States Congress and our diplomatic corps people organized and working to reach out and establish diplomatic relations with these people in the face of this major effort on the part of these very narrow groups of people that are being financed by the private aerospace industry that wants to get patent rights on the technology so that they can own it like in perpetuity. So that another 1,000 years from now, you know, if anybody wants to build an interstellar spacecraft, you're going to have to pay these guys through the nose for the technology because they own it. You know, that's what they're trying to do right now. Okay, so it's extraordinarily important that our citizens mobilize and rise up. But we know perfectly well, as we've known over a 50-year period, that our regular people aren't that organized. The people aren't every day spending their time figuring out how to get Congress to do something. So the New Paradigm Institute has been created. And we now have a website up where all you have to do is go to newparadigminstitute.org and just put in your name and your zip code, and you just push a button. And automatically a letter will go to both of your United States senators and your congressperson telling them that you support their desire to get this information released, that you support their efforts to do this, okay? And to tell them to put pressure on these people in the 10th District of Ohio and the 3rd District of Alabama, you know, and this Johnson, you know, who's the Speaker of the House, you know, put the pressure on them to get this full bill passed.
They did pass.
So it's important to point out that they've passed 24 pages of this. Okay, this was a 64-page bill, but they passed 24 pages of it, which very importantly contains the command for them to gather all this information together from all those same agencies and to put it into the same digital recovery system and to have it available as of October 18th to be delivered to the Library of Congress. That this is in fact going on right now. And so the clock is running right in front of us. The problem is that they have drawn out of this 64-page bill 40 pages which contain the enforcement provisions. That what do you do if they basically thumb their nose at Congress and refuse to turn over the information? We know that when the United States Congress ordered them to, for example, turn over the videotapes of the torture sessions at Abu Ghraib, that the Central Intelligence Agency destroyed them after having gotten the subpoena to do it. He said, yeah, so what are you going to do to me about it? The answer was they did nothing about it. And so that what we got to do is make sure the Congress stands up on its hind feet and puts the 40 pages back in that contain the enforcement provisions of this, so that when the October 18th deadline comes along, they don't get the story that, well, my mother's horse died, you know, and I got distracted and I had to go to the funeral of the horse and I wasn't able to do the homework. You know, I mean, that's the kind of routine that we're expecting here, unless we get these 40 pages put back in. So it's really necessary to have this mobilization. And the New Paradigm Institute is going to be establishing these Citizens for Disclosure action groups in all 435 of the congressional districts.
Oh.
In a major state office in every one of the 50 states. And we're going to be mobilizing, we're going to be preparing documents and information for people in every single one of those 435 offices, so that they can in fact know what to say to their people, to get familiar with what the constituencies are in their area, where their allies are. And this is the mostly complete bipartisan bill that anybody has seen in Congress in the last 50 years. That the people on the extreme right want this thing passed, the people on the extreme left want this thing passed, all the people in the middle want this thing passed. It's just that they've got these people sitting on these two major committees of the chairing of the House Intelligence Committee and the House Armed Services Committee that are basically putting their thumbs on the scale. Okay, and so what we need to do is mobilize the rest of the country to demand that this be done. We need to have a basic positive citizens uprising here to assert our democratic rights, to have access to this information. That this information is going to be the basis of if we can get the board put back into place, because they took out the board. They've taken out of the bill in that 40 pages they removed from the 64-page bill. They took out the appointment of this board of review that is going to be authorizing the public release of this information. And they put back into the hands the heads of each of the military services and intelligence agencies to make their own decision about what they think ought to be made public. And we already know what they think ought to be made public, which is nothing, you know? And so this is basically a toothless bill right now, except for the command that they prepare the information. And so that they're actively under a constitutional obligation now to organize the information, to seek it out. And we just saw that actually Chris Mellon just issued a thing to the cell phone that I have over here, pointing out that they've gotten access to information that the people inside the intelligence communities and inside the national security state infrastructure that want this stuff disclosed are actively engaged in gathering all this information up right now, and getting it ready to turn over. So there's a great war going on inside all these agencies right now between the people who want to get this done and those who are trying to stop it. So this is an extraordinary adventure that's happening here, and that we want you all to be part of this. And we want all the 60 people or so that are listening and all the 40 people or so that are here tonight, you know, to go out and talk to all your friends and neighbors, and go on to newparadigminstitute.org, you know, and sign up and become part of the volunteer group. We can put you into the proper categories of what your professional skills are, what kind of time you have available to work on this thing, you know, and that we're going around trying to get people to give additional funds so we can hire professional people to work with our staff, because all of this requires professional skill, you know, to do all these things that we're doing. We have to have a complete website that is interactive. We've retained the Cosmic group in Santa Cruz that built our website for our Lakota People's Law Project. We're building out the website to make it completely interactive, so you can contact us and get all the information, and we can craft the information for you for your own congressional district, so you'll know how to work on this project. So all of this stuff is going on right now, and we want you all to rise up in the same way that you rose up and stop the construction of any new private nuclear power plants in the country, the way you rose up and stopped the war in Vietnam, the way that you rose up and are mobilizing people to try to stop global climate change. This has, and people stood up for the fundamental civil rights, marched in the streets to protect civil rights, stood up for gay and lesbian rights. Now this caused an absolute sea change in our country, in our policies. This is another policy that we from the Christic Institute and now the Romero Institute are coming before you to tell you that whatever level of credibility you think we have with you over the past 50 years of the cases that we've been doing, we're telling you that now is the time and now is the issue. This is the issue that can bring together people all across the political spectrum, and it can break the national security state here that's been holding this information secret. Because people are going to say this is an absolute outrage. This shows that the national security state is completely out of control, who are defying our presidents, defying our House of Representatives and our Congress, that are defying the Constitution of the United States, and that we can begin to start to structure some solutions to bring the national security state under control here in our country, and to get this information released to the public, released to the world, so that we can enter into an entirely new era. I mean, this is going to be this next 7 or 10 year period is going to be a period that people are going to look back on 1,000 years from now, 1,000 years from now, and say, what did you do during that 10-year period when you had an opportunity to help craft the features of the process, the protocols that are going to govern our relationship with the extraterrestrial civilization for another 1,000 years. You know, what did you do? You know, what would you have done if you existed back in Rome when you knew that they were enslaving other people around the world? What would you have done You know, what would you have done back if you were alive in the 1840s here in our country to try to deal with human slavery? You know, the fact is that most people didn't do anything.
Yeah.
And the fact of the matter is, unless we mobilize here, the same thing will happen again with regard to this issue. Not enough people will come forward and do what has to get done without your help. Okay? And so we're asking for your support. We're asking for you to contact the newparadigminstitute.org. Okay, and sign up, become a member of the Citizens for Disclosure, get all the information from us, and help us, you know, becoming members of our New Paradigm Institute operations, and, you know, chipping in $5 a month or something, you know, so that we can hire people to run our websites, to be field organizers, to go out and help train people in the congressional districts, in these key districts. You know, there's 100 things that we need to do. And the fact is, we at the Christic Institute and Romero Institute have demonstrated to you over 50 years that we know how to do this, and that we will do this. You know, this is money well spent. If you can help us raise these funds to talk to your friends and neighbors to become members, that just, you know, do the $27 a month like Bernie did. You know, just send it $25. Let's round it off. $25 a month. So that we can hire people, and there's a little pamphlet that tells us in the state of California what the salaries are for people in a 501c3 public interest office. So we know exactly what the proper salaries are, et cetera. We have audits that are conducted every single year. We have an A+ audit every year about our funding and how we take care of the funds and how we keep the receipts on every single step we take. Okay. So please join with us. Go on to newparadigminstitute.org and join with us. And let's have a whole second wind here. We've all worked together in the past on a number of major projects. This is the next one, and we want you to help us to bring this information to the public and to the world. The future depends on it. Okay? Thank you.
Wow.
Thank you so much, Dan. I wanted to-
Microphone, please use the microphone.
I wanted to make a pitch for those of you who want to become what's known as a major donor. And for just about $80 a month, you can become part of the Earth Circle. And I'm on a somewhat higher level, but you can get more inside information and conversations. And some of you might be at a higher level. And this needs support financially to make a difference. So yes, we absolutely want our volunteers at $5 a month. And we do want people who can contribute more, okay? And this is really going somewhere. And I've been a somewhat higher donor for about half a year. And I have been fascinated with the things that I've heard in, behind the scenes. So I invite you to join the major donor, and they are doing special information sessions, which is costly and time consuming, but totally valuable to be a part of a cutting edge of a new world of knowledge, and well done. And I've known Danny for so long. Thank you, Danny. And I really want to invite you to something super special. So whatever state you are in about donating, or, at whatever level, I want you to benefit from this and be part of a new world, as Danny says. And we really need to step forward and if we don't, as Danny says, it could fall flat again. But let's all step forward, just like we did with climate change, just like we did with many other projects, okay? So. Is someone considering the major donor option, starting as low as $80 a month and moving on up? I'm going to leave those papers over there, okay? And can help you talk to Danny and Sarah, if you want to get more details and get to be part of the cutting edge and make a big difference in our world. So thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Lauren. Pardon?
I was looking for the bill online. It's nowhere to be printed out or anything. Where can I read it in full?
Well, that you could go to, look it up under the Schumer Rounds bill. It's actual Senate Bill 2226. And it was the Senate bill itself. So I say, this didn't get passed. What got passed was the 24-page version of it that was passed as part of the National Defense Authorization Act. It's actually section 1841 of the National Defense Authorization Act of 2024. Okay, so it's and this is how you find it. But the key is, in my judgment, is to look at the Senate bill, because that's where it's going. That's the model that we want. And even though only 24 of the 64 pages got passed, this is where we're going. That's the one you want to find. Senate Bill 2226. Okay?
Okay, great. Thank you.
Jenny, while you're up there, one of the things that we shared when I met with you earlier that I found very inspiring that I think people would like to hear about is how the current Pope is relating to all of this. Would you be willing to share a little bit about that?
Well, sure. Let me tell you that what's happened here is the Catholic Church, in light of, as they say, in light of the discovery of more and more of these new exoplanets that are the result of the launching into space of these new space-borne platforms. This started out with the Hubble that everybody heard so much about, but then they put up the Max Planck that launched a satellite observation, and they now have the James Webb telescope. And what they've been doing is they're now what they call planet hunters, that they're actually finding the new exoplanets that are around, and they've discovered now over 6,000 of these planets, that many of which they have found in what they call the Goldilocks zone. Which means that from the Goldilocks fable, that it's not too cold and it's not too hot like the porridge. It's in that Goldilocks zone that isn't too close to their sun or too far away from it, so they can have liquid water on the planets. And what happened is that they convened a gathering of the scientists at Castel Gandolfo, just outside of Rome, where the Pontifical Observatory is. And they issued a public statement. It was published by Father Jose Gabriel Funes, who was the head of the Pontifical Observatory. And what they said is that in light of the discovery of more and more of these new exoplanets, it has now become clear, much more previous to when it had been previously anticipated. It said that now that we're going to discover life elsewhere in the universe. And therefore, the time has arrived for the commencement of a very serious discussion among our people of the profound philosophical and theological questions that are posed to our human family by the discovery of life elsewhere in the universe. What I did, as based on my previous 10 years as general counsel at the Jesuit National Headquarters in their social ministry office, I reached out to Father Funes, who is a Jesuit priest, and went to see him. And he told me right within the first 2 minutes of our face-to-face conversation, he said, look, Danny, he said, we're not talking here about the discovery of only some single cell life form under some frozen sea on some distant moon surrounding some distant planet in a far off galaxy. We're talking about another highly intelligent, highly technologically developed, but distinctly non-human species right here in our Milky Way galaxy. He said, that's what we're talking about here. And so that the Catholic Church, now under Francis, the first Jesuit Pope in history, they are moving now to undertake major scientific investigations They're reviewing all of the information that's in the Vatican archives about this. They have not yet taken the position they're going to be made public, but one of the things that we're going to be doing at the New Paradigm Institute is meeting with the people at the Vatican. We're going to be meeting with the heads of all of the major religious denominations on the planet to try to convene them in a disclosure of their own. To start revealing to the world the information that they have, also in some of their most secret scriptures about the existence of this extraterrestrial civilization. Okay, now people who have studied the Vedic writings and stuff know that there's information there about these, and that there are writings in the Hindu faith and in the Buddhist faith about contact with other worldly beings. Okay. And so that this is something we're going to be demanding disclosure not only from our government people, but also from the major religious institutions to try to reveal the capacities that our human family really has, that they've kept secret. I mean, people know that what are referred to as siddha in the Hindu faith, of the ability to engage in telepathic communication, the ability to levitate, the ability to, in fact, have precognition, the ability to actually transmute matter from one form into another. These are capacities that people refer to it as spoon bending, just to make fun of it. But the reality is that people, probably people right here. I know that Sarah has experienced it. That actually you can take full hard metal spoons and you can go through a particular process of drawing down golden light through your body and down into the center of the earth and back up through your body into your arms, and can turn the solid metal spoons into like chewed gum, so that you can have a direct impact on the material world by your state of consciousness. Now, these are capacities that our human family has, making us more like the kind of remarkable things we see some of the UFO people doing, like walking through walls and materializing and dematerializing. These are things that have been kept secret by the major religious institutions in deep sacred writings, which are now becoming available. And so this is another major portion of the New Paradigm Institute to try to bring forward this information about the actual capacities of our human family, so that we don't have to stand in such complete awe in the face of this extraterrestrial civilization, just because they may be a few billion years in advance of us. So that's
Thank you, Danny.
Information that we have. Okay.
Danny, I just,
Yes, sir.
I sorry I interrupted you earlier, but when I was talking with John, he was telling me that in a few of the cases, the experiencers had actually physical objects in their bodies that they remembered having been implanted, and
Yes, sir.
John actually connected them with medical people and actually held implants that were not terrestrially originated in his hands.
That's right.
And I just wondered if you could comment on
Yeah.
on that.
There have been a number of the people who have been found to be extraordinarily credible people who have recounted having direct physical face-to-face encounters with people from a UFO, in that they recalled, not under hypnosis, but under what they call regression therapy of engaging in holotropic breathing, deep breathing exercises, deep relaxation breathing, have been able to recall that they've been implanted with some device of some sort, and that they've then been examined by medical experts and have recovered actual tiny transmitters that have been buried deep into their body. And these devices have been examined. And I was actually present during one of them being removed. And then they put it in a little tiny capsule, and they bring it to the laboratories to examine them. And that they've discovered all kinds of extraordinary things about these little implants, the kind of features that they had, the capacities that they had. And have been totally unable to explain how those things got in the people's bodies. That's true. And John Mack was involved in that. I'm trying to remember the doctor that's right, Roger Lear.
Dr. Roger Lear.
Roger Lear was the one that was doing the little operation on the person where I went one time when they did it. Okay, so these are real things. Yes.
Yeah, what do the aliens look like when they retrieve them from the crash sites? Do they all look the same, or were they from different species, different alien races?
There's actually, one of the courses that we're going to be teaching at the New Paradigm Institute for university credit is going to be directly on that issue of what are the different species that have actually been recognized by people. And that I've done the initial orientation lecture for that course, and we're talking about 5 of the most predominant ones. They're the little folks that are like about 3.5 feet tall with the big round heads and the big dark eyes that are kind of tear-shaped eyes, a little pinhole nose, etc. These are the kind, if you ask any 5th grader in the country, you draw an ET, and it'll draw it for you, and that's the one that's most commonly known. Then there are what they call the tall whites, the tall grays, and they're like 5 feet tall. And these are they're like of the size of a regular person, but they look just like the little guys. Those are the what they call tall grays. Then there are the reptilian ones that actually, but it's important for us all to remember that all of us went through a reptilian stage of development in the womb.
Right.
That were the gills and the whole 9 yards, and actually the embryos, the human embryo during its gestation period, tracked the kind of stages we went through in our biological evolution here on our planet. And so it's apparent that on one of the planets that they sort of stopped at that point of being reptilian, but they're fully sentient, fully intelligent, extremely benign. They get pretty bad press because people kind of relate reptilians to these kind of cold-blooded snake kind of people. But the fact is, Barbara Lamb, who's a very dear friend of ours, Barbara Lamb has been one of the preeminent psychologists who's actually interviewed people who have been kind of traumatized by their initial encounter with these beings, because you have this kind of cellular response when you encounter one of these beings that are so completely alien. The genetic kind of predisposition we have toward being cellularly terrified of something that we don't recognize, that she'd been counseling the people, and she for many years has been saying, after all the hundreds of people that I've interviewed who've had these encounters, I really wish I could get to see one of these beings, so I'd really, before I pass, she's 90 years old now, she's got a lot of time left, but she'd like to get to see one of them. She told us the story. She came into her house out of her garden one sunny spring day, and there's one of them standing right in her living room, standing right there looking at her, and was giving off all kinds of these really positive and friendly vibes, and telepathically communicated her, saying, see, you wanted to get to see one of us, here we are, we're totally friendly. And she was kind of a little bit afraid because they had these eyes, with the kind of horizontal pupil in them. Or vertical pupil, but she said it was so kind and benign that then it just turned around and just walked right through the wall and left the house. But so those are the reptilians, and then there's a group of them, a 4th species that they call the mantis people, and these are big, tall, like 7 feet tall, very, very skinny, very thin, kind of bent over top like that. These are the ones that appear to be in charge. Whenever they're seen together with any of the other species, the reptilians or the tall or short grays, they seem to be the ones giving directions to whatever they're doing together. And these are what they call the mantis people, because they look a little bit like a praying mantis. They're so skinny. And then there's the one that's subject to some more controversy, but it's the so-called Palladians. The people from the Pleiades, and they purported, this is Billy Myers and lots of other people have asserted that these look just almost exactly like Homo sapiens, except that they're tall, and what's so suspicious about it is they're tall, blonde-haired, blue-eyed, kind of very Aryan people, except that their earlobes are a little bigger than others, but this is one that is reported fairly consistently. And those are what they call the Palladians. Okay, so these are the 5 that are the most dominant, but most of the ones that have been recovered and have been actually interviewed, apparently. I interviewed a guy by the name of what was his name, Albert Stein, his name was. He was a longtime employee, a clerk typist from the United States Army that was in Project Blue Book. That he actually got to go with his commander to S4 out in Nevada, and actually was present when his commander went into a room with one of the ETs. A big 5 foot tall ET, and was telepathically communicating with his commanding officer. And he said that he was afraid of them. Not that it had done anything, but he was afraid of them. But this was the big 5 foot tall one that looked very benign and very friendly and seemed to be cooperative in sharing information with them. In fact, Albert read a series of these cards. They had these 3x5 cards where they had notes taken on them of telepathic interviews that have been done with this particular extraterrestrial biological entity. They call them EB for short. But they talked about this, and he communicated to them some things about where they came from and things like that. So there's a lot of information, and that pursuant to the orders that are presently in place by the 24-page statute that was passed on December 22nd of 2023. The security departments and everybody are under orders to produce this information, which would clearly include all of those notes from those interviews. And so there's going to get a lot of content of that information right away. And that's more than 25 years old. That stuff. So that stuff should be released right away. Okay?
Danny, which species is the bad drivers?
The bad drivers?
The ones who crash.
Well, it's interesting that this started early, that back in June of 1945, which will be subject to the post January 1 of 1945 disclosure, that Colonel Philip Corso talks about the fact that before he was a colonel, he was a major, I think, in 1945 in June. That he was a range officer at Yucca Flats at White Sands, the White Sands Proving Ground, where they were testing the Trinity site. They were testing the initial atomic bomb that they exploded there. And he said that he actually encountered a UFO that had landed, had been forced to land because apparently it got engaged by the massive radar systems that had been put up all around Yucca Flats to secure the area, and it interfered somehow with their navigation system. They were on the ground. He was taking a lunch break and had gone off the range up into the hills and walked right up to one of these UFOs that had come down in the hills. And he saw the being get out of the craft, and the being communicated with him telepathically, pleading with him to please have them turn that stuff off so they could leave. Go away. And he actually exercised his authority as a range officer to go back and have them turn it off for 5 minutes. And he saw them just flash away and leave like that. So that they've
That didn't make it into Oppenheimer.
Pardon?
That didn't make it into the movie Oppenheimer.
And it's because of the reason that I credit that particular account is because he left that information to his grandchildren. In a little 8mm black and white home movie that he took himself, to only be shown to them after he died.
Wow.
You know, and I ended up seeing the film, and I said, now that's a credible piece of information.
Yeah.
You know what he showed, and so that's that didn't make them bad drivers. And the bottom line is that there appears to be, and we're investigating this at the New Paradigm Institute because we have an investigative capacity as well. As you well know from all the investigations we've done in Iran Contra and Silkwood and other things, and that we're investigating a lot of these particular claims. But the bottom line is there's some possibility that the covert state in the military have been engaged in trying to develop some mechanism to bring them down. You know, or they have shot at them. I mean, some of them have shot at them. There's actually one base commander gave orders to shoot at them, you know, but it didn't do any good because it couldn't penetrate to them, you know. But the bottom line is that they've been trying to figure out some kind of device by means of which they could bring them down forcibly so they could recover their technology. So we're gonna have to find out what level of success they've achieved in doing any of that.
Dennis,
Yes,
would you share that we're working on the 100 facts and the
Yes.
15 top stories? So that we can have credible stuff on
Yeah.
our site?
yeah. So that, what Sarah's saying is that, Richard Dolan and our staff are working on a list of 100 facts that you can basically rely upon, that the New Paradigm Institute is asserting, basing our reputation on, saying these facts are true. You know, whereas we'll say things like, I am willing to say, based on having seen the little 8mm movie, little film for his grandchildren, I'm willing to vouch for the fact that I believe that Major Corso at that point was telling his grandchildren the truth, that he actually had that experience, you know, and therefore it sheds additional light on his later comments that when he was later colonel at the Pentagon and in charge of research and development at the United States Pentagon, he states flat out that he was put into possession of technology that was recovered from the Roswell crash. And he says specifically that he got the information and was instructed to figure out how to feather this in to certain industries in our country. And one of the things he got was the silicon chips that actually became the base of the computer technology that were done. He also got fiber optics from the craft, and also night vision equipment that they made completely military, you know, and Velcro, they had the Velcro stuff. Now, one of the things he didn't talk about when he went public with that information was the fact that they apparently found a helmet in the craft at Roswell that the pilot used to navigate the craft. They actually had a helmet and they navigated the craft telepathically. And they've been working like mad at trying to figure out how to work that thing, but apparently nobody in the military has a high enough level of consciousness to make it work. But I'm not sure they found many other than Pat Price. There's a few people that they have found in the remote viewing program at Stanford Research Institute, for example, that they've used the helmet with. But anyway, so we've got that, and we're going to be also providing a list of the 15 major incidents that we believe are completely credible, which would include some of the 100 facts that we're going to do. But we want to make these available so people can get a start, to get their feet down, to say, okay, the people that did the Silver case, the people that did Iran-Contra, the people that did, you know, the 3 Mile Island case, the ones that did the prosecution, the Ku Klux Klan, if they're telling us, look, here's information you can take our word on this, that we've investigated these things and we believe this is credible, so people can get their feet down to get started on this thing.
When will that be ready?
So, well, we're working on it right now. That Richard Dolan is working on it. He's going to actually publish it as a book, but we're going to probably release it ahead of time. Okay. Yes.
I really applaud the energy, effort, and time you put into this and your colleagues. I think it's just incredible what force you're producing. My confusion is when you go down philosophically or strategically down towards developing the notion of UFOs as the focus, people then start just putting it aside or saying this is crazy stuff.
Mhm.
When you go down the road of, you know, this is a military effort that will help in preventing wars and nuclear catastrophes, then that focus seems to be more important to me.
Well, I hear what you're saying. The challenge is that the people in the military, I'll tell you the story that captures the spirit of this thing, and that is that Jacques Vallée tells the story that they were discussing during the Clinton administration the possibility of revealing information about the UFO stuff, and he couldn't quite understand why the pushback is coming so hard from the military. And he was in a set of conversations with the presidential science advisor of the Clinton administration. He said, you explained to me, what do you think is behind this, the idea behind this, is their consciousness? And he said, here, come outdoors and let's talk about this before we can talk about it. So they go outdoors and they're walking along and Blake tells the story where the science advisor from the Clinton administration says, look, to understand this, let me tell you the story about this little old man who was coming home late one evening, and he's walking along through this field, and he sees a little light shining in the grass. And he looks down and he bends down and he sees it's a frog. And the frog has this little light on the top of its head. He bends down and picks the frog up and looks at the frog, and it turns out that it's a crown on the head of the little frog. And he's looking at this, and the frog looks up at him and says, you know, I'm not really a frog. I'm a beautiful princess. And some evil sorcerer has turned me into a frog. But if you will just kiss me, I'll turn back into a beautiful princess, and we can be married and have wonderful children and help rule the realm in a benign and positive way. And the older man looked at him, he said, actually, he said, at my age, I think I'll settle for having a talking frog. And this is the story that the science advisor told Jacques Vallée, is that the people that are inside the military have got this kind of tunnel vision. That, you know, the old Sufis say, you know, when a pickpocket meets a saint, all he sees are his pockets. And that these people have gotten this assignment, and they've gotten this perception of everything, that if any vehicle just comes into the airspace of North America that doesn't have their permission to be here, they view it as a hostile, because that's their job. Now, the reason for that is because we've created this national security state. You know, and the national security state believes that anybody who isn't subject to our military dominion, you know, is a potential enemy. And so this is something we have to try to get over. And this is the same, so that to get into the discussion with them about, well, the military really needs to deal with this as a military threat. If you get too far down into that, you aren't going to be able to undo that. That people are all going to be reacting out of kind of a second chakra dialectical military defensive posture, and they do this all the time. You know, they say, oh, we'll give you $700 billion a year for military stuff, you know, but we won't give you anything for poor kids that, you know, have been abandoned on the street and need food, you know, but you don't want to cater to that. What we're trying to do is have a new paradigm, a new upward, positive, forward approach to the whole thing. Is that here are the possibilities. Here are the positive things that we can organize around as citizens. We don't have to scare you. We don't have to placate the national security state, you know, before we can get this done as citizens. I mean, the fact is, you know, the fact that we have 800 US military bases all around the world, you know, and that our military budget is bigger than the next 10 countries in the entire world combined, including Russia and China and India and Pakistan and, you know, Japan. All of them, all taken together, are less than our military budget every year. And they've gotten our people convinced that somehow we're the good guys, and that we're trying to protect liberty around the world. And so what I'm saying is that we have to be careful of going down that military line, because it's kind of more instantaneously appealing, and people will react to it in a kind of a Pavlovian way. But we're trying to find the people inside the military and inside the intelligence communities who themselves, even though they've spent their life in that world, have risen above that. And I've come to understand that we've got to have a more elevated approach to this whole thing.
So strategically, what you're doing is saying, if we do something that's uplifting and understanding about the human relations with the extraterrestrials, then we got a kind of a back door into dealing with our own military avarice and greed.
Yes, no, it does. It actually, if one were trying to appeal to people of different constituencies, like for example, in the Karen Silkwood case, that Sarah talks about a lot, when Sarah was the National Labor Secretary for the National Organization for Women doing the Karen Silkwood case, we had the entire labor community, because Karen Silkwood was a labor organizer for the oil chemical and atomic workers when she was killed. We had that entire constituency. We had the American Civil Liberties Union people, because she was being wiretapped and was violating her fundamental rights to privacy. You know, we had the anti-nuclear weapons people because they were smuggling, you know, plutonium to Israel and Iran. We had, you know, the other constituencies. Pardon?
Environmental.
Yeah, the environmentalists, of course, because of the contamination of the plant, where they were pumping the radioactive effluents into the river, the Susquehanna River. You know, that what we want to do is organize all the different constituencies, and the constituency that is concerned about the national security state being out from under proper constitutional constraints is a very major constituency in the country.
Yeah.
Okay, and we've already got people in the military who are on our side. So we don't have to go any farther into trying to recruit them. You know, there are people from inside the military and the intelligence community who are already engineering a lot of this movement. So that's the reason we're doing it. Just, yes, that's
Repeat the question, Danny, would you repeat the question with someone, because the camera cannot hear the question?
Oh, okay, I'll repeat the question then, yes, that's the time.
I just want to make an observation and thank you. It sounds like you're saying that for the two of you, all life up until now, it's like a prelude. This is the real, right now, this is the human story and the galactic story. And as someone who is part of your community, heart to heart, I just want to thank you because it seems to me that this is a movement that can be local, national, global, and galactic all together. And we don't even know how quickly it could congeal if we each do our part. So I want to say thank you.
Yeah.
I want to ask you a question. What is your relationship with the New Paradigm Institute with MUFON?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, no, we've had direct conversations with them. That we're all trying to. No, the question is, what is the relationship of our New Paradigm Institute with MUFON, the Mutual UFO Network, or other groups, you know, such as Stephen Greer's group, the Disclosure Project, all of the NICAP people are still around the middle. That what we're trying to do is bring all of the different people together into a coordinated method so that we can bring the benefits of all the work we've done over the last 50 years and the kind of resources that we have and the staff that we have in place, the kind of the websites that we've got that are operational. What we're trying to do is bring everybody together in a coordinated way to do things. And for example, our assumption is that a lot of the people that are going to be in these 435 groups out through the congressional districts are going to be MUFON people that are already there.
Yeah.
You know, they're
MUFON's been there 50 years as well.
Yes.
So over 50 years.
exactly.
Yeah.
You know, and what hasn't happened is they haven't really gotten to be political activists. They've been doing little investigations and research on all kinds of stuff that's absolutely essential and have huge resources that we all need to coordinate. What the Christic Institute, the Romero Institute has got is being politically active, and public policy active and litigation active and investigative active. And so that what we're trying to do is bring the resources together in a coordinated way and bring them to focus on the Congress to get the statutes actually passed that we need to get done and the enforcement done on these things. It's a major
National Alliance.
Yeah, it's a huge national alliance around this issue of the UFO stuff. And so it's a whole new paradigm. It's a whole new worldview that actually has to be generated here that takes into account and integrates the reality of that most of the organizations have been around for the last 40, 50 years. They've been completely devoted to trying to convince people it's true. Okay. And so that all their structures and instrumentalities and everything are devoted to trying to get people to believe it's true. The fact is we've reached that point now.
Mhm.
And so what we have to do is we have to ascend from that place and say, okay, now it's true. Now what are we going to do about it? You know, and how are we going to deal with the national security state that's trying to keep it secret? Let's try to get this stuff done so we know how to have a positive relationship with the extraterrestrial civilization. So that's really the kind of unique contribution that the New Paradigm Institute is trying to bring. Yes, Jan.
I'm just really feeling Jim Channon's presence right
Pardon?
now. Jim Channon, Lieutenant Colonel Jim Channon, who did the 1st Earth Battalion myth back in the 80s and inducted the whole West Point graduating class into the 1st Earth Battalion. And I've been really feeling the 1st Earth Battalion energy the last few months. And what you're speaking to is all the people inside the military, just like inside the police or the fire department or any place, who are there for the right reasons and who
Right.
need support from all of us. And I'm just blown away that you could get something like that through the US Senate, and with both sides. And it's like literally nothing like that's happened in the history of the country that I'm aware of. And I really hear what you're saying. This is a moment that's really different. Just a quick reflection, my friend Michael Lindeman, interviewed 40 people who were working in the underground cities under the Antelope Valley. And he took a sketch artist with him. They interviewed all these guys. They were all top secret clearance doing plumbing and painting and stuff, dropping in elevators for like 20 minutes at high speed and stuff. And they came up with 14 different beings that like one person would say these three, and but they put it together and I just wondered, I'm sure he would provide that.
Yeah, I gotta get Michael, we gotta drag him up out of semi-retirement.
Yeah.
He's out in Colorado
Yeah,
Springs.
I mean,
We
and
lost-
so
we-
articulate, so articulate too.
Yeah, I know, we gotta get Lindemann back
Okay,
in action.
all right.
here. I agree, yeah, have Mikey call me, because I've gotta get to him. I got an old phone number, but I guess it's in Roman numerals. Oh, please, yes, please do. Yeah, okay, yes, sir.
I would like to state the obvious, that doesn't seem to be obvious to people. The aliens have been coming since ancient civilizations. If they wanted to attack us or wipe us out, they would have done it a long time ago. They have the technology to turn off stuff. So to think that there's a natural threat is totally illogical, as Spock would say. You know, I mean, it does not make any sense. They would have already done it already.
Yeah.
I mean, they had the capacity that they're not interested in attacking us or interested in keeping us probably from blowing ourselves up.
Yeah.
And wrecking the rest of the planet.
Yeah, and to state the corollary to that, is that, if they've been here all of this time and have not done anything adverse to us, then the other question arises, so why haven't they just come and talked to us? Why haven't they just come and said, here we are? I had this conversation
Because
with
they
Luke.
want to be dissected.
Well, no, it's, I mean, they're capable of not being dissected, I can tell you, if they don't want to. Yeah, and so, but this question came up when Lou Elizondo and I were sitting talking with the remnants of the staff of ATIP after it was being transitioned. We're sitting in Washington DC, and one of them asked, why won't they just come and talk to us? Why won't they just come out in the open like this and just tell us what's going on? And I told them a story which they seemed to be shocked by, and that is the story of the little boy who loved butterflies. And that he had this collection of butterflies, and out in his backyard, he had this big kind of gossamer tent, with butterflies flying around in it. And he was looking for a perfect specimen of a monarch butterfly. And he finally looked around, he finally found this little larvae of a monarch butterfly, and he brought the little cocoon back home. And he put it in this little box and had cotton in it, and he put lights on it to keep it warm. And he observed this over time, and he watched it, and finally the butterfly started trying to break out of the cocoon, and it was struggling like mad, and it was breaking out and fluttering and trying to get out. And he watched it for the longest time. Finally, the butterfly was just struggling against one last little silken thread of the cocoon and struggling like mad, working like trying to break through this. And the little boy watched this and watched this. He finally became kind of out of compassion. He went and got a little pair of scissors and he snipped the last little silken thread, and the butterfly came free. And it was an absolutely perfect specimen of a monarch butterfly, except that it could never fly. Because it turns out that it was struggling against that last little silken thread that really developed the muscle structure that it had to have in order to fly. And that's the condition that our human family is in right now. We've woven ourselves into these silken threads of nationalism and militarism and nation statism, and commercialism and everything else. And we've got to break this last set of silken threads around ourselves in order to be able to sustain our citizenship within the galaxy. We can't go out into the galaxy with nuclear weapons and a racist, misogynist attitudes. So we've got to try to overcome these things ourselves. That's why this is such a positive program. This is providing us the opportunity to rise above all of these silken threads that we still remain bound under. Okay, and that's the answer to the other side of the question. Why haven't they just come forward and say, here, let us tell you how to do everything? Because if we fall into that, say, oh, they know everything here, we're just gonna do whatever they tell us. What happens to our personal dignity? What happens to our own personal rights? What happens to the preservation of certain values that we may be able to contribute to the galactic civilization? You know, that's what's at issue here, okay? So look, please join with us and help support us and get on board, become, part of the Citizens for Disclosure. And tell all your friends and neighbors about it. Organize, little gatherings like this into your house, have some little salons, and get on to newparadigminstitute.org and come and see us.
And give 5 or 80 or $8,500. Yeah.
Did you connect with Frank Kaufman before he died?
No,
Frank Kaufman was the head of the CIC, which is the former of the CIA in Roswell, and I did one of the last interviews with him. You did. I hope you've enjoyed our program tonight. Thank you for hanging in there with our technical issues. But it looks like everybody had a good time. Hope to see you on Wednesday night when we are celebrating that every day is Earth Day. And we've got a special video presentation from Jane Fonda, who I worked with for 11 years. And some really great guests lined up. So hope to see you on Wednesday night. And I'll take a look at your chat. But let me know, did you guys have a good time? Is this valuable? You're all still here, so I'm hoping so. And I see Ian and hey, there's John Martin, my buddy John, and Ian and Doug and Diane. I'm getting a chance to look at all of you because there's Lynn and Leaf. I so enjoyed watching Lynn dancing the other night. It was good to see her up dancing. Kiki and Roger and Bonnie, Waterfall, all the whole crew's there. All right. Well, God's blessings, everybody. I'm going to close this down now, and I will see you all on Wednesday.